In Part 2, we're going to look at Team Phase 1, Team Organization and Setup. The outline for this part is first a look at common problems related to setting up a team. And then we're going to talk about organizing, membership, location, the logistics of a meeting, values and norms, and talk about the team charter. Here are some common problems related to setting up a team. If a team isn't set up right, it could be doomed to failure or mediocrity from the very beginning. The first common problem is a location. You need to have the right location in order for the team to be able to meet and have good logistics. Another common problem is the configuration of the team. So we're going to look at that with respect to who's on the team and what the size of the team should be. Meeting time conflicts is another potentially large problem. So we're going to talk a little bit about that too. So Phase 1 is devoted to organizing and setting up a team to avoid those common problems. So we're going to look at team membership, the team meeting location, that is the logistics of the team values and norms, and team charter. If we address these adequately, a team has a fighting chance of being highly successful. With respect to team membership, the first consideration is the right people. So we need to have appropriately chosen subject matter experts, and we might want to consider the influence that people might have in the organization or their knowledge of the organization. Let me add, with respect to the subject matter experts, sometimes you might want to consider having more than one expert in a particular field to improve the dynamics of the team. Sometimes if only one person on a team knows a particular area, they have trouble convincing everybody else about things that they need to know. The right size of the team is a factor, because if a team gets too large, they have difficulty meeting. It cuts down on the number of venues that you might have available. It's harder to coordinate, and it's easier for people to slack off and depend on others. A factor that a team needs to wrestle with when it's self-organizing, when it's first getting together, is what their structure is going to be. So here are the three types of structures that a team could have. However, you can put together a hybrid of these. I might mention a few of those illustrations later on. But one operating structure for a team or a committee is to be a committee of the whole. And that's basically where everybody works together on the problems and issues. And so they have to be able to meet regularly, but they basically do things together and solve problems as a team. That is good for some circumstances, but probably for a Six Sigma project is not going to work. Then the second structure is a task assignment structure. That's where the individuals meet together, but they each take on a certain task and bring it back to the team to fit together and work together toward the common objective. So these are individual assignments that people bring back. That's probably the most likely scenario for a Six Sigma team. But sometimes a team is larger, or its task is large, and so you have a subcommittee structure. And that's where you do meet together as a team, of course, but the work is broken up into subcommittees. The subcommittees operate and then bring back reports of their findings to the whole team. That's probably good for larger teams or committees, or when groups don't meet very frequently. Now, a hybrid would be a task assignment team, for example, that does set up an ad hoc committee or set up subcommittees for specific reasons, and then when it's not needed anymore, they would disband. So anyway, this is an important topic because I find the problem is people have different expectations if they don't understand how people are going to be working when they're not meeting. Meeting logistics turn out to be a larger issue than probably most people realize. Having the right location is important so that people can make it on a regular basis. The meeting time and frequency is important. If you're meeting at the wrong time of the day to where people's attention spans are shot, you're not going to have an effective meeting. I find mornings are better than afternoons, and certain days of the week are better than others if you're trying to get people's attention. Also, meeting frequency is an issue, and that's something you might want to experiment with. Weekly meetings might be good, or maybe every 2 weeks. It just depends on what the team's needs are, but it is important to take this into account with some seriousness. And finally, the facility, I feel, is very important. The dynamics of a meeting room can make a lot of difference to the results of a meeting. I've been involved with groups where the meeting rooms really destroyed the atmosphere of the meeting, and we moved our meetings just to get into a more intimate, more conducive atmosphere. Also, having equipment and other media that you might need, like computer projection systems, that can make a difference. And then also, I'm a big believer in refreshments. Typically when I'm having a meeting or something like that, I will bring refreshments, even if it's out of my own pocket, just because I know how important it is. If you want to have a high-performance team, you might want to spend some time at your first meeting or two talking about how you're going to operate and what's important to the team. What are the values of the team? You're trying to build trust. You're trying to avoid the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And this phase here, this step, can go a long way toward doing that. So I have an example I want to show you coming up. Here is an example of a set of norms and values. I ran across this some time ago. I've used it a number of times and shared it with others. But what's going on here is we're trying to help people become comfortable and properly oriented toward how the team's going to operate. What are the expectations for each other? We want to build trust, so we want to know how we're going to operate. So these are intended to help people realize that, yes, we all have our backgrounds, but let's try and be unbiased in how we think through issues. We want to put value in what other people say. And there's a confidentiality point at the bottom that you may want to put in if it seems like it's the right thing to do. And that is to let people know that what's talked about in the meeting stays in the meeting. Sometimes that may not be a something that the company allows, but it can be a norm that can make a huge difference in people's willingness to discuss things. And of course, you have to trust that everybody will keep things confidential. Here are some norms that deal with how people work together in meetings, how they handle disagreements and dissent. I think it needs to be real clear that people are going to remain cordial, even though they might disagree. I think it's real important that people will be allowed to speak for themselves rather than somebody else speak for them or interpret what they're going to say. Sometimes we strive for consensus, but I think it should be very clear that dissent is okay, because sometimes it's the dissenter that really is closer to reality. Finally, after everything's said and done, I think it's important for everybody to agree that if there's any authority that the team or committee has, it's as a team, and no individual has any rights or authority outside of the meeting. This can be real important if people are looking to the committee for some kind of decisions that might affect operations. The last item I'm going to talk about is a team charter. Actually, the team charter is a fundamental ingredient of Six Sigma projects. This is probably one of the distinctive features of Six Sigma. So a charter for a project would include the project definition, the projected savings, the deadline, who the members are and their roles, especially if they have a leadership role. The steering committee would oversee the putting together of the charter. It's practically a contract, but we call it a charter. It also can show for each person what % of their weekly time is expected to be devoted to working on the project. And then finally, there's signatures from management committing resources. This would include, for example, for each member of the team, their supervisor signing in agreement about the percentage of time this person's going to be working on the project. There are some fairly intricate charters that some companies use. I noticed on the Johnson & Johnson charter that they've got a lot of information about what type of team is being formed, so that it's very versatile in its usage as a Six Sigma tool. Well, let me wrap up this Phase 1 discussion by saying that I realize that there's a lot of recommendations here about what should be done in setting up a team. Let me contrast that to the way some teams are formed. A bunch of people are thrown together. They find a room. They go in, and then they say, what are we going to do? We've got this project to do. And they don't get formed well, and what happens is a lot of time gets wasted. The project doesn't get any progress. People quit coming to meetings, and pretty soon you have a dysfunctional team. So I believe that these steps are all very important. You're really investing up front in the potential to have a high-performing team.